Good day, everyone. This is Tullio Siragusa with Tech Leaders Unplugged. Let's get unplugged today. Today's Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023. We're talking about automation and AI, specifically asking and answering the question, does AI help with automation? My guest today is Tony Sumpster, who is the CEO of Worksoft. Welcome to Tech Leaders Unplugged, Tony. Good to have you.
It is great to be here, Tullio. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Before we get started and dive into this particular conversation, there's obviously a lot of talk about AI for different uses. So this is going to be really good, talk about automation. How did you get here? Tell us a little bit about your journey and about Worksoft. How does this topic tie in?
Yeah, so both stories are long, but I'll keep it short. So Worksoft's been around for around 25 years. It has a very rich history in large-scale, complex test automation. Really around the SAP and Oracle space, done just a huge amount there. And fortunate enough to land some of the largest corporations on the planet. So we, really good there. The company was founded on a basic and very simple idea, which was how do we get business involved in testing our core applications? And along the way, but certainly created a no-code platform that became really good at large-scale, complex change, and that's where we started. Along the way, we learned some things about AI, but I'll get to that in a bit. For me, I'm a software guy. I've been and done many things. This is my second time as a CEO in the private equity world. Been with Worksoft for 3 years, and we're on a transformational journey. And that journey is to take automation where our customers need it, which is in 3 areas. One is how do we understand business process, and how do we do analytics around it? Why do that? Because we want to do pre-production or test automation better. And then the third piece of that jigsaw, if you will, is really to make sure that we can reuse the assets that we built for test in production. And people call that RPA today, but process understanding and discovery, test automation or pre-production automation, and production automation. And that is that world. My background, again, software, 20-something plus years, maybe longer, but we're not talking about it. But anyway, so just a bit of background for me.
All right, thanks, Tony. Thanks for the introduction. Let's dive right into this topic about AI and automation. The question we're asking, does AI help with automation? Now, it would seem obvious that it does, but I'd love to get your thoughts on where are the better use cases today for how AI has evolved, at least as of today.
Yeah, so I think it's it's a very interesting time. You find yourself sometimes in your career when the whole playing field that you're on starts to shift. We saw it in the movement to the internet around 2000. That was pretty interesting. We've seen things like Web3. We've seen a whole bunch of other areas, and right now we're at this space where AI has broken out. Now, if you talk to the AI researchers, they'll tell you we've been on this journey for 10 years, and that's all good. And for the rest of us, we're just catching up. And some of that's true. But if you look at things like ChatGPT and its variations, 3, 3.5, 4, Bard, all those different types of things, what we're starting to see is in the large language models, and you see this as LLM often, is that we are able to consume and train data sets on vast amounts of data. What does that mean? It means that we can ask questions or prompts, if you will. We can ask questions of these large data sets to give us information back. And so there are many places where this is going to work. So think of support calls. I can, if I train my model correctly, I can ask a support system to give me the answer to how do I do something. Training is another great example of if I have my manuals and they've been consumed, or my videos, or whatever it happens to be, and I can ask questions about how I do something on the fly, I can make my users more effective about the way they do things. There are places where if you're a knowledge worker, your world is going to be very, very interesting 3 to 5 years as these models are going to come to more accurate answers than a human being will do. One that particularly interests me is transactional lawyers.
Mm.
It's a pretty set, in a pretty safe set of instructions, rules, the way that the law works. Um, and if you're in that sort of stuff, I think you're going to have to, reskill yourself about the way you do things. So
Yeah.
lots of use cases coming down the pipe that are, really going to encourage people to be more effective in their roles and are going to create a whole, a new set of roles as well.
You said something interesting about the legal profession, and it sparked this idea that that's a highly regulated space. So is financial services, healthcare. They all have some compliance requirements. Some of them stricter than others. Do you think automation will enable less errors and more, the ability to be compliant with certain laws, et cetera? And are you seeing use cases? You mentioned legal where that's being done today.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was on a panel last week in New York, and we were talking about AI and automation. There was this, idea about this generative AI. There were speakers from United Healthcare. There were big service providers who service a good number of vertical industries. And the reality is that almost everybody sees the ability to give large language models and the models that will come next guardrails. All right, and those guardrails can be rules that can fit into a regulatory framework. They can be rules around the way that we ethically say something. If you think about large language models today, they're pretty much without guardrails. You stick stuff in, you train it, you ask for a question, how to make a nuclear bomb. Well, yeah, probably shouldn't give the answer to that question, but today, if it's trained on that sort of stuff, you could. And so, what's happening now is the models that are to come are going to have guardrails around what it gives, how it gives the information, and what happens with that type of information. And so, anything that's regulatory compliance, anything in those sorts of areas, they will be the first of the new set of AI, if you will, if you can believe this. Maybe a year from now, we'll have people who are just doing legal. They'll have the regulatory frameworks. They'll have all the guardrails in place so that when you ask a question, it's legally sound. It would stand up in court, all those sorts of things. Now, whether that's a year away or not, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you that. And it probably needs to go to a court for precedence. But all these things are very, very possible.
Yeah, interesting. I can imagine asking a platform a question on a generative AI a question, gives you the answer, and then gives you a very long disclaimer. So,
Well,
but this kind of
yeah,
thing.
well, so that's true. One of the things that came up in ChatGPT 4 was the ability to have where did the source come from. So in the previous versions, it didn't say where the source came from. So you got an answer, but do you trust it? I mean, here's the thing about AI. Do I trust the data that I'm being given? And giving things like sources. So here is my answer. I got this from here, here, here. This is a healthcare question. I got it from the Mayo Clinic. All right. I believe the Mayo Clinic. If I read it on a website, I would believe them because they're trustworthy. And that sort of thing is going to start to underpin the broad sets of information that we're going to get in the future. And I think as we get on to how automation and AI work together, you'll start to see the training, the guardrails, all that sort of stuff come in, and we're starting to see that now in the broad context of general AI.
Let's talk a little bit more about the automation piece. I know that at least for the past 10 years, maybe 15, we've adopted machine learning in the context of, for example, MarTech. But it required massive amounts of data in order for it to do the right set of permutation. Is basically thousands of A/B tests, right? That it learned based on input, and through that, it informed the ability to execute on a campaign. Some of that has been automated, some of it hadn't. but definitely provided the capability, for example, that you would normally need an army analyst to do, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Right now, most of it is very informational. You get to the information quickly. You can generate content quickly. You can analyze information quickly. But where are the uses when it comes to automation? How are you
Yeah.
guys putting that into play with automation? Maybe you have some
Yeah.
specific use cases.
So great question. So we have been working on AI machine learning for probably the last 6 or 7 years. Um, in our core automation, we have dynamic learning, relearning as objects change in an application, as the flow of a process changes. We can learn that, we can adapt. Our tests, one of our clients uses our technology to do 110,000 tests a night. You can imagine that what happens in that particular case is that if an object, a social security number field changes and the schema behind it changes, you really want to ripple that through all of the tests that have that particular object. The other place where we see huge amounts of thing going on where AI is being super helpful is around a problem we call the process visibility problem. And that is most organizations don't fully understand what their processes are. And the way you used to go about it was you get a bunch of consultants and subject matter experts in a room. You use Visio or iGraphics or something. You build models. You map it out. Or if you're even more old school, you get some brown paper and some sticky notes. And your human beings, who are the subject matter experts, they would put things up on a board, and you would come out with a view. Now, it's unheard of, but apparently, humans are fallible. I know it's hard to believe, but apparently we are.
Don't say.
I know. It's hard to say. So what we've been working on is how can I get a way to collect the way that human beings do things, and we have some great technology around process capture, which uses machine learning to be able to help us understand what is going on with multiple sources that is capturing what human beings are doing. There's some great technology in the process mining space, which is where we correlate data together, and we use machine learning and AI to look for variance of processes, for how fast something is going, whether something's tested or not, whether something is automated or not. So, but that process visibility piece is where we're seeing the strongest growth in our business, because customers want to know not what is my process ideally, because when we designed it 2 years ago, the world changed and COVID changed. We bought a company, we've introduced new products, but actually what is really going on, and help us do that, because then we will become more efficient in what we do. And that's just one example of how AI today is really changing the game. We're going to get more efficient. If you just take it from a test automation perspective or in production, I'm going to know more at the start of where I'm going to automate something or why I should automate something than we've ever done before. So I'm going to be better than ever before.
This topic, thanks for sharing that, begs the question, and I can't help but ask the question, because what it sounds as so. For example, going back to the MarTech example, you can enrich data with external inputs, and essentially between your contextual data and your static data and the external inputs, you can massage it and come up with better outcomes. But it sounds to me, in order to apply it to processes, how does it learn what's going on, for example, in the industry and what other companies are potentially doing that's working better? And I can't
Yeah,
help
and
to think, does
that's a great
blockchain
question.
play of this, where you have that transparency and smart contracts and the ability to share, amongst companies that could enable getting there faster and improving processes, or is that not necessary?
So I think you're going to end up with two types of AI, right? You're going to end up with this generalized base of AI, and then you're going to end up with private models that will be right for your organization, right? So if you're Nestle or Microsoft or Google or whoever, your data set is so rich because you're in so many countries with so many product types, and so many SKUs. Your supply chain is enormous, and your data set therefore is huge. And I think for those sorts of organizations, their competitive advantage will be building out models that are specific to them. I think if you're a small town fabricator in downtown San Francisco, you can't afford to do that. So you're going to look to companies who just do benchmarking on AI, and blockchain could absolutely be part of that. Smart contracts could absolutely be part of that data set, feeding in, saying that, look, for a company of your size with this revenue, your time to market for a new product should be X. Your, movement of a product from ideation through to sitting on a customer's desk, for the top quartile is, 5 days. Or whatever it happens to be. And so, we're definitely going to see two different things turn up: generalized huge amounts of data with big players and those who will put the foundation in place. I think the internet, think Wikipedia, and then there'll be people who've got very private large language models, or whatever the next generation is, who will have just their specifics with the guardrails in place, all the compliance, the regulatory stuff, and that will give them the data that they need. And then there'll be third parties who will sell that data in the same way they do today.
It's interesting what you're bringing up, this idea that most likely the way AI will be most effective is truly decentralization and specialization. I kept thinking, like when it comes to QBRs, for example, they're very time consuming to prepare a QBR for a client. And if you want to do it right, especially if you not only want to present performance for the past quarter, but also provide some intelligence about here's where you stack against other companies in the industry in terms of the maturity of adoption of technologies, of processes against other companies in your industry, to be able to provide insightful, valuable data to a client to guide them through what they should be focusing on. That's not an easy thing to do. And I kept thinking, man, this would be so awesome if there was an AI module. You just plug it in and you put in your client's parameters, how things were done, the metrics from the last quarter, and you ask it to give you recommendation based on what's going on in the industry, companies in similar size and space, and where they are in terms of their maturity level as an organization. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where eventually we could have these modules where they could be applied for a number of business applications, where it's not just one big model and you kind of have to customize it? It's really like that's ultimately going to be a bunch of products, SKUs, if you will, that have different uses. How's that going to be managed in your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to find ways of connecting specific specialist modules on top of this sort of foundational layers, where I think about it. We don't see that today, but there will be this big foundation layer which will be managed by the Googles and Microsoft, those who've got the resources to do it. The event I was at on the HFS event that I was at, within a month or so, they're going to release a chat GTP model, a large language model, on all of their research. Now imagine that you're building your QBR. There'll be some AI that will clearly pull data from many places. They'll put it into a PowerPoint or something similar, and you'll say, okay, but in this I need to have this specialized data which I pay for through a subscription, and I can I've got an API that sends a prompt to my analyst database effectively, and it's going to say, hey, my customer, so the prompt is give me the latest benchmarks for fabricators or plastic fabricators in California. Give me these things I need to know. That's sort of doable now. I mean, scarily, we're going to find people who just find a way to get pieces of data and then bring it together in a consolidated fashion. Because for us talking to customers, it's not about the data, it's about the conversation. What's the data telling us? How do we have that rich conversation about how we make the customer better? And for us, that's around process understanding, using machine learning to make them better, so that they can move faster, so they can innovate faster, they can be more competitive, they can reduce their costedness, so they can get products out to market. But all of these connection points, they don't quite exist today in a way that all of us could use it, but we're not very far away at all.
Interesting. I can't help but think about the, some of the large software companies have marketplaces where you can acquire certain modules and capabilities. It sounds to me as though for startups, at least, really specialization and niche for AI is going to be key. And then hopefully those will get acquired or they'll be part of a marketplace someplace. Is that where you're envisioning? I mean, everybody would never imagine they had 30 or 40 apps on their mobile phone,
Sure.
20 years ago. It's like, there's no way I'm going to have an app for that. I just go on the web. And then we all have a bunch of apps, 20, 30 plus different apps for different uses. There's not a single one app that does it all. Is that kind of the where we can borrow the success as we move forward with AI applications that are specific to certain use cases? I
Yes.
mean, is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're bang on. I think your ideas there are exactly where it is. If you look at the amount of funding going into AI, I sat on a investment dinner with a bunch of AI VCs, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, and the number of things that they were betting on was pretty much down in this road, which is get people very specialized around the data, find the data to do training on, and then being able to work out how to find way to monetize that data. And I just think there are just so many methods that you could use. I mean, again, I'm super excited about what the possibilities are. We are right at the beginning.
Yeah, I'm curious whether the winners will be the big platforms, or those platforms transform into entry points for different platforms. Like, will Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, what have you, will they be basically foundational entry point to the very specialized modules that you could either license to their marketplace, or if they've acquired those companies, license directly through them? Or is it going to be more of a you know a collection of bunch of independent software companies that you end up adopting to get what you need to get to? That
Yeah,
remains to be seen, right?
I wish you knew the answer. I mean, I
That's
think
the $1 billion question, or the
it
$1 trillion
is.
question.
It is. I think one of the things about large companies is they struggle to innovate at the pace of other people. Do that. If you listen to some of the talking heads, if you will, Jan LeCun or Jeff Hinton, Sam Altman, they will tell you that there's huge progress on these big models, all the rest of it, but they'll also tell you that that small organizations, small teams can move incredibly fast. And so I don't think we know the answer. I think there's some new models around decentralization, which you mentioned earlier, which I think to be super helpful. I do think that there is a place for a foundation layer, which I think is going to happen. And again, in this model, it's Wikipedia with things on top. So we'll see. I don't know how it's going to work out. What I do know is we're in a fantastically interesting time, and the AI is going to make a big difference, certainly to our automation, the way we help customers. But I think overall to society, I think we're in an interesting spot.
Tony, it's been great to have you with me today. It gave me a lot to think about. Hopefully, those watching will get a lot to think about as well, in terms of the future of AI and where the opportunity. Sounds like a great time to be in the AI space if you want to be a startup. Whether you go at it alone or build a module that some big platform is going to acquire, that's the future. I mean, it seems pretty clear in terms of where all the attention is going to go. Thanks for being with us again. Just stay with me as we go off there in a second. I want to announce what we got coming up. We've got a few more guests coming up. We've got one Thursday. We have to move tomorrow's appointment because I'm hosting a brain date in Ascend Summit here in San Francisco. So we got Thursday with Amanda Blevins, who's the VP and CTO of Americas for VMware. We're going to talk about Beyond Multi-Clue. And then we're going to talk Friday with Piyush Milik, who's the CTO at Verdict, about decoding tomorrow's digital frontier. And then one more coming up next week on Tuesday will be with Lisa T, who's the Managing Director of Data and AI at Launch. So Very interesting guests. We're going to continue to see what we can learn. And thanks for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you might be. See you again Thursday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific.